I'm Hazel, 32 female. I live in a fairly busy city in a condo that's practical, but not exactly soulful. My job as a senior data analyst is demanding, filled with spreadsheets and projections that pay the bills but don't feed the spirit. My real life, the one I feel in my bones, is lived 2 hours north at a small lake house I inherited from my grandmother. This story is about how my entitled sister decided my sanctuary was her personal cash cow, and how I had to draw a line so clear and bright it could be seen from space. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The lake house isn't grand. It's a modest 2-bedroom cottage with cedar siding that's weathered to a soft, silvery gray. The front porch, wide and welcoming, is home to 2 rocking chairs that have soothed 3 generations of my family. My grandmother, a woman with a quiet strength I've always tried to emulate, left it to me, and only me, in her will. She told me once, "Hazel, this place needs a caretaker, not just an owner. Someone who understands its peace." I understood. It was my sanctuary, the only place on earth where the constant hum of city life and digital noise finally went silent. Every penny of my savings for the past 5 years had gone into it, not for lavish upgrades, but for preservation. I had the roof redone, the plumbing modernized, and the old dock carefully rebuilt, plank by plank. It was a labor of love, a connection to my past and a promise to my future self. My family, however, had a different view of the property. My parents, Robert and Susan, saw it as a nice family asset, a place for reunions they rarely organized. But my sister, Jessica, saw it as an accessory. At 28, 4 years my junior, Jessica had built her entire identity around her online persona. She was an influencer, a term that seemed to cover a multitude of sins, primarily involving taking artfully curated photos of herself in locations she often couldn't afford. Her life was a performance, and she was always looking for a new stage. Her boyfriend, Nicholas, was her designated cameraman, a floppy-haired 29-year-old who seemed to believe that owning a drone made him a filmmaker. They were a matched set of ambition without effort. I'd always been generous with the lake house. My policy was simple: if you want to use it, just ask me. Check my calendar, clean up after yourself, and respect the property. It wasn't a hotel. My parents used it a few times a year, always respectfully. My best friend, Scarlett, would join me for quiet weekends of wine and board games. But Jessica's requests were different. They were less like requests and more like announcements. She'd text me, "Hey, me and Nick are taking the lake house for the long weekend." Not asking, but informing. Early on, I let it slide. It was easier than arguing. But her stays were always messy. She'd leave behind wet towels, a fridge full of half-eaten food, and once, a glitter explosion in the guest bedroom that took me a month to fully eradicate. She treated my sanctuary like a free-for-all party pad. The last time she'd used it, 3 months prior, I'd had to lay down the law. I found a cigarette burn on one of my grandmother's hand-stitched quilts. When I confronted her, she was flippant. "Oh, Nick's friend was being an idiot. It's just a blanket, Hazel. You can get a new one." My voice was colder than I intended when I responded. "It was Grandma's, Jessica. You don't get a new one of those. From now on, you are not to have guests over without my explicit permission." "This isn't a frat house." She had scoffed, called me uptight, and hung up. The tension between us had been simmering ever since. I decided that for the upcoming summer, I was keeping the house for myself. I needed the peace. I had a major project at work that was going to be draining, and my weekends at the lake were the only thing that would keep me sane. I blocked out every weekend from June to August on the shared family calendar I kept for the house, marking them all as Hazel Private. There would be no room for misinterpretation, or so I thought. My neighbor at the lake, Mr. Henderson, was my eyes and ears when I wasn't there. He was a retired carpenter in his 70s who had lived next door to my grandmother for 40 years. He was a kind, observant man who loved the tranquility of the lake as much as I did. He'd call me if a big storm was rolling in or if he noticed a branch down in my yard. He was the perfect neighbor, present but not intrusive. We had a comfortable routine. When I'd arrive on a Friday evening, He'd often be on his porch and would give a friendly wave. Sometimes he'd wander over with a basket of tomatoes from his garden. He was part of the fabric of the place, a reassuring presence who confirmed that this small corner of the world was still as good and quiet as I remembered. He knew about my troubles with Jessica, having once commented gently after one of her stays, "Your sister sure does like loud music, doesn't she?" It was his polite way of saying her guests had been a nuisance. His presence would prove to be more valuable than I could ever have imagined. The lake house was more than property. It was my peace of mind, my inheritance, my responsibility. And I was about to find out just how little that meant to my own sister. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in late May. I was knee-deep in a data set, trying to isolate a statistical anomaly, when my phone buzzed with Jessica's picture on the screen. I sighed, letting it go to voicemail. I knew it wouldn't be a simple hello. With Jessica, every conversation had an agenda. A minute later, a text message appeared. "Pick up. It's important." Reluctantly, I stepped into the hallway and called her back. "What's up, Jess?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Hey, so I have the most amazing idea," she began, her voice bubbling with a manufactured excitement that always set my teeth on edge. "You know how I'm trying to level up my brand this summer? I need some really high-end, exclusive content. Authentic, but also aspirational, you know." I had no idea what she was talking about, but I mumbled a non-committal, "Uh-huh." "So, I was thinking," she continued, "I'll just use the lake house for the summer. Like from June through August. Me and Nick can set up a base there. It's perfect. The aesthetic is so rustic chic. We can shoot content, host some collabs with other influencers. It will be huge for my portfolio." I was so stunned by the sheer audacity of her idea that I was momentarily silent. She wasn't asking to borrow it for a weekend. She was announcing a 3-month-long occupation. "The whole summer?" I finally managed to say. "Jessica, no, that's not possible." "What do you mean, not possible?" Her bubbly tone vanished, replaced by a sharp, defensive edge. "Don't be difficult, Hazel. It's a family house. We're supposed to share." "First," I said, my own voice firming up, "it's not a family house. Grandma left it to me, and I've always been happy to share, but you know my rules. Second, I've already blocked out the entire summer for myself on the calendar. I have a huge project at work, and I need the weekends to decompress. I'm using it." There was a huff of air on the other end of the line. "Oh, come on. You're not going to be there every single day. You can't just hog it for 3 months. That's so selfish. I actually have a business reason to be there. You just want to sit around and do nothing." "My doing nothing is what I use the house for," I countered, my patience wearing thin. "It's my place to get away from stress, not a free film set for your brand." "The answer is no, Jessica. It's final." "This is so typical," she spat. "You always do this. You hold things over my head. You have a good job and your own place, and I'm trying to build something for myself, and you won't even help. You know how expensive it is to rent a location like that." I couldn't help but let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That's exactly the point, Jess. It is expensive. And this is my property. You're not entitled to use it for your business for free. We can talk about you maybe using it for a weekend in September if you ask nicely and agree to follow the rules, but the summer is not up for discussion." The conversation devolved from there. She accused me of being jealous of her burgeoning fame. She claimed I was deliberately sabotaging her career. She even brought up a time in high school when I wouldn't let her borrow a dress, framing it as proof of a lifelong pattern of abuse. It was classic Jessica. When faced with a boundary, she didn't just push against it. She tried to bulldoze it with emotional manipulation and revisionist history. Her voice grew louder, more frantic. "Mom and Dad will hear about this. They'll tell you how unfair you're being. You can't just cut off the whole family." "This isn't about the family," I said, my voice low and steady. "This is about you and your complete lack of respect for me and my property. The conversation is over." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a potent cocktail of anger and frustration. It was exhausting. It felt like no matter how calm or rational I was, any interaction with her spiraled into a dramatic reenactment of a childhood squabble, with her as the perpetual victim and me as the heartless villain. A few minutes later, as I knew it would, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. "Hazel, darling," she began, her voice oozing with a practiced, placating sweetness. "I just spoke to your sister. She's very upset." "I'm sure she is," I replied dryly. "She told me you two had a little misunderstanding about the lake house," my mom continued. "Honey, you know how hard she's working on her little internet business. It would mean so much to her to be able to use the house. Can't you just let her have it for a month or two? It's important to support family." This was their dynamic. Jessica would create a storm, and my parents, desperate to avoid conflict, would rush in to calm the waters, which usually meant pressuring me to give in. They enabled her behavior at every turn. "Mom, it wasn't a misunderstanding. She demanded the house for the entire summer to run her business for free. I said no. The calendar has been marked for months. I am using it." "But you're being so rigid," my father's voice chimed in from another phone. They were on speaker. "It's just sitting there empty during the week. Why can't she use it then?" "Because I don't want it turned into a 24/7 content house," I exclaimed, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "I don't want her influencer friends there, leaving messes and breaking things. Remember the quilt? This is my property, my sanctuary, and my rules. I have said no. Please respect that." There was a sigh from my mother. "Well, I just hate when you two fight. Family is more important than some old house." "This old house is my most valuable asset and my peace of mind," I said quietly. "And family should be about respect, not entitlement. I have to go." I ended the call, feeling a familiar wave of resignation. They would never get it. In their eyes, my boundaries were an inconvenience, an obstacle to the family's peace, which was really just code for Jessica's happiness. I sent a quick text to my best friend, Scarlett. "The annual Hazel is Being Selfish campaign has officially begun, sponsored by Jessica." Her reply was instant. "Ignore them, it's your house, your rules, don't you dare cave." Her words were a small comfort, a reminder that I wasn't crazy. But as I sat back down at my desk, I had a sinking feeling. This was far from over. Jessica wasn't the type to accept no for an answer. She was the type to find a way around it. 2 weeks passed, and a deceptive quiet settled over the family front. My parents sent me a few stiff, one-line texts about unrelated matters, and Jessica went completely silent. I knew better than to believe this was a truce. Silence from Jessica usually meant she was plotting. I tried to put it out of my mind, focusing on my work project and looking forward to the first official weekend of my summer sanctuary, which was just a few days away. I'd already packed a bag and bought groceries, mentally transitioning into lake mode. The discovery happened on a Thursday morning, the day before I was set to drive up. I was taking a short break, scrolling through a travel blog, when I saw an ad in the sidebar for Airbnb. It featured a generic, charming lakeside getaways headline. On a whim, I clicked it, setting the location filter to the small town nearest my lake house. I was just curious to see what other properties in the area were renting for. I scrolled through a few listings, a large, modern A-frame, a couple of rustic cabins, and then I saw it. My heart stopped. It was my house. There, in professionally shot, brightly lit photos, was my front porch, my living room, my grandmother's quilt draped artfully over the armchair. The photos were sickeningly perfect, staged to look like a page from a home decor magazine. Nicholas's drone had clearly been put to use. There were sweeping aerial shots of the property, showing its proximity to the water, the dock I'd painstakingly rebuilt. The listing title was Serene and Stylish Lakefront Oasis W Private Dock. The host was listed as Jessie, with a profile picture of my sister, smiling sweetly at the camera. I felt a hot, prickling wave of rage wash over me. She had gone behind my back, not just to use the house, but to monetize it. She had hired a photographer, or more likely had Nicholas do it, trespassed on my property to stage it, and listed it for rent without my knowledge or permission. My hands trembled as I clicked through the listing. She was charging $400 a night. The calendar showed it was booked solid for almost every weekend in June and July, starting with the very next day. My weekend. The weekend I was supposed to be there. Someone had rented my house, my bed, for the weekend I was planning to use it. The description she wrote was a masterpiece of fiction. "Come and unwind at our beautiful family cottage," it read. Hosted by Jessie, a local creative who has poured her heart into making this a perfect getaway spot. Enjoy swimming off the private dock, cozy nights by the fire, and stunning sunsets. We can't wait to welcome you. Our family cottage. Hosted by Jessie. I felt dizzy with disbelief. She hadn't just crossed a line, she'd obliterated it. My first instinct was to call her and scream, but I stopped myself. What would that accomplish? She'd deny it, gaslight me, or play the victim. I needed evidence, Dead a plan. My mind, trained to find patterns and solve problems with data, kicked into gear. Emotion was a liability right now, I needed strategy. I immediately took screenshots of everything: the listing, the photos, the calendar, her host profile. I documented the URL. I checked the house rules section she'd written. It was filled with laughable hypocrisy. No parties or events. Please respect the property as if it were your own. Maximum of 4 guests. She was setting rules for a house that wasn't hers. A house she herself had disrespected time and time again. Then I saw the reviews. There were 2 of them already, from what must have been secret stays she'd hosted in May. Jessie was a wonderful host. The place was absolutely charming and the location is unbeatable. We had a small issue with the Wi-Fi, but she was super responsive and got it sorted out. Can't wait to come back. The other was similar, glowing with praise for the attentive host and the beautifully decorated cottage. She had been running this operation for weeks, right under my nose. The mention of the Wi-Fi issue made me pause. How did she get it sorted out? She wouldn't know how. It must have been a lie, or she'd gotten lucky and it fixed itself. I needed to know who was coming tomorrow. Who were these strangers who thought they had a legitimate booking at my house? The Airbnb platform, for privacy reasons, doesn't show the guest's full name, but it did show a profile picture and a first name. Mark. He and his family were scheduled to check in at 3 p.m. on Friday. My plan was to drive up at noon. My mind was racing, piecing together the timeline. The photo shoot must have happened during one of those quiet weeks. She must have used her key, the one I had foolishly never taken back, to let herself and Nicholas in to stage the house. She had probably been intercepting messages from renters and coordinating cleanings, all while giving me the silent treatment. The audacity was breathtaking. This wasn't just about using the house. This was a calculated, premeditated business venture built on fraud. She was using my asset, my inheritance, to fund her influencer lifestyle, and was prepared to kick me, the actual owner, out of my own home to do it. I called Scarlett, my voice tight with controlled fury. "You are not going to believe what she's done," I said, and laid out the whole sordid story. Scarlett, being a lawyer, was appropriately horrified but also immediately practical. "Okay," she said, her tone all business. "First, do not contact her. Do not contact your parents. Let her think you still know nothing. Second, document everything. You've already done that, which is perfect. Third, report the listing to Airbnb immediately as fraudulent. It's your property, and you can prove it." "I'm going to," I said, "but not yet. I'm driving up there tomorrow before the guests arrive. I'm going to change the locks." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Good," Scarlett said. "That's exactly what you should do. This is your property. Secure it. And Hazel, when you do report it, make sure you emphasize the liability issue. Unauthorized rentals on your property could expose you to massive legal problems if someone gets hurt. Airbnb will take that very seriously." Her advice solidified my resolve. The anger was still there, a hot coal in my stomach, but it was now fueling a cold, clear sense of purpose. Jessica had mistaken my generosity for weakness. She thought my desire for peace meant I would roll over and accept any disrespect. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The battle for the lake house had begun, and I was going to finish it. With Scarlett's advice echoing in my mind, I spent the rest of Thursday methodically building my case. I knew that confronting Jessica and my family would be like walking into a hurricane of denial and blame shifting. I couldn't just have accusations. I needed irrefutable proof, a dossier so complete that no amount of gaslighting could poke a hole in it. My data analyst skills, usually applied to corporate spreadsheets, were now focused on a single target: my sister's web of deceit. My first step was to report the listing to Airbnb. I followed Scarlett's advice to the letter, creating a formal complaint through their trust and safety portal. I uploaded a copy of the property deed with my name on it, a utility bill for the lake house addressed to me, and a picture of my driver's license. In the description of the issue, I was calm and factual. I stated that I was the sole owner of the property, that the host, Jessica, was my sister, and that she had listed my property without my knowledge or consent. I emphasized the legal liability, stating that the unauthorized rental activity constituted fraud and exposed both myself and Airbnb to significant risk. I received an automated reply saying they would investigate the matter within 48 hours. That was fine. I wasn't waiting for them to act. I was just creating a formal paper trail. Next, I turned my attention to the 2 existing reviews on her listing. Jessie was super responsive and got it sorted out. One review said about a Wi-Fi issue. This line had been bugging me. Jessica couldn't fix a Wi-Fi router if her life depended on it. She would have had to call someone. On a hunch, I logged into my account for the internet service provider at the lake house. I navigated to the support history tab, and there it was, a log of a service call from 2 weeks prior. The note stated that the customer, who had identified herself as Hazel, had called to report an outage, and that a technician had been dispatched the next day to fix a connection issue at the local junction box. She had impersonated me. She had called my internet provider, pretended to be me, and ordered a service repair, all to ensure her illegal guests had a seamless experience. The cold fury I'd felt earlier intensified. This was a level of premeditation I hadn't thought her capable of. She wasn't just being opportunistic. She was actively committing identity theft to facilitate her scam. I took a screenshot of the service log, adding it to my growing folder of evidence. The file name was simple: fraud. My investigation then moved to social media. I knew Jessica documented every moment of her life, but I rarely looked at her accounts because I found them insufferable. Now, I scoured her Instagram page and Nicholas's as well. I went back over the past month. At first, it was the usual endless selfies, pictures of avocado toast, and videos of Nicholas flying his drone over random parks. But then I found it. A post from 3 weeks ago on Nicholas's feed. It was a stunning, high-resolution aerial shot of my lake house at sunset. The caption read, "Location scouting for a big summer project with my creative partner at Jessie Goes Glam. Big things coming soon. Director Life Content House Lake Vibes." Several of their influencer friends had commented with fire emojis and questions like, "OMG, where is this? Can't wait to see what you guys create." Jessica had replied to one, "It's our little secret hideaway. We're curating a very exclusive experience this summer." Our secret hideaway. She was publicly positioning herself as the owner, the curator of an experience at my home. I scrolled through more of her posts from around that time. I found a picture of her posing on my dock, wearing a new bikini with the caption, "Summer office is officially open for business." The photo was dated. It was a Wednesday, a day she should have been in the city, a day I was at work, completely oblivious. She had been there, with Nicholas, conducting a full-blown commercial photo shoot on my property. I saved every post, every comment, every self-aggrandizing caption. The digital trail she'd left was a blazing neon sign pointing to her guilt. She was so caught up in performing her life online that she didn't realize she was meticulously documenting her own fraud. This wasn't just about a family dispute over a cottage anymore. This was calculated deception for financial gain. She had lied to guests, impersonated me to utility companies, and misrepresented ownership of my property online to build her brand. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when I thought about the logistics. How was she managing the cleaning and turnover between guests? She was lazy and hated cleaning. She wouldn't be driving 2 hours each way to scrub toilets. She must have hired someone locally. I remembered the name of a cleaning service my grandmother used to use, a small, family-run business in the nearby town. I gave them a call. "Hi," I said. "My name is Hazel. My grandmother used to be a client of yours, and I own her old cottage on the lake. I was just wondering if you've had any recent service calls to that address." The woman on the phone was friendly. "Oh, yes, the little gray cottage. Of course. A young woman named Jessica booked us for a deep clean about a month ago, and she's scheduled us for weekly service every Friday morning through July. Said she was running it as a holiday rental for the family." My jaw tightened. Did she pay for these services? "Yes, she paid for the first one via credit card and has a card on file for the weekly cleanings," the woman confirmed. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I am the sole owner of that property, and I have not authorized any rental activity or cleaning services. Please cancel all future appointments for that address immediately. This is a fraudulent booking." The woman was audibly shocked. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. Of course, we'll cancel it right away." She seemed so professional. "She's a great performer," I muttered after hanging up. So that was her plan. Automated cleaning, remote management. She had it all figured out. She had built a complete, illegal business operation using my life's biggest investment as her foundation. By the end of the day, I had a digital folder containing screenshots of the Airbnb listing, the social media posts, my property deed, the internet service log, and a note detailing my call with the cleaning company. I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of sorrow and steely resolve. Jessica hadn't just betrayed me as a sister. She had treated me like a faceless mark to be exploited. She had fundamentally misunderstood who I was. She saw me as a quiet, non-confrontational pushover she could manipulate. She failed to realize that the same meticulous, detail-oriented nature that made me a good data analyst also made me a formidable opponent when I had been wronged. Tomorrow, I was driving to the lake. The digital war was over. The real-world battle was about to begin. Friday morning, I woke up before my alarm, a knot of adrenaline and anxiety tight in my stomach. I loaded my car in the pre-dawn quiet, my movements precise and deliberate. I had my bag for the weekend, a cooler full of groceries, and a small, heavy toolbox. Inside the toolbox, nestled amongst a hammer and screwdrivers, were 3 new deadbolt sets and a state-of-the-art smart lock. I had also called a local locksmith the day before and scheduled him to meet me at the house at 1 p.m., just in case my amateur handiwork wasn't up to snuff. I was leaving nothing to chance. The 2-hour drive to the lake was a blur. My mind was a machine running through the plan over and over. Arrive by noon. Change the locks on the front door, the back door, and the sliding glass door to the porch. Call the non-emergent. Why police line to give them a heads up about a potential trespassing issue with a family member who had been illegally renting my property? Place new, clearly worded, no trespassing, signs on the edge of the driveway. And then, wait. As I turned onto the long, gravel driveway leading to the cottage, I saw the first sign of Jessica's operation. A small, professionally made wooden sign had been staked into the ground near the mailbox. In elegant, cursive script, it read, "The Lakeside Oasis." My blood boiled. I stopped the car, got out, pulled the sign out of the ground, snapped it in half over my knee, and tossed the pieces into the trunk. That was the first eviction notice. The house itself looked pristine from the outside, a testament to the cleaning service she'd hired. But knowing the violation that had occurred, it felt tainted. I used my old key for the last time, stepping inside. The air was sterile, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner. My personal touches were gone, replaced by a generic, soulless rental aesthetic. My grandmother's quilt was folded neatly on a chair, reduced to a prop. A basket on the coffee table held a welcome note printed on cardstock, signed with Jessica's bubbly signature. "Welcome to your getaway, Jessie." I crumpled it in my fist. I didn't waste any time. I got the toolbox and started with the front door. My hands were surprisingly steady as I unscrewed the old lock set. It was a methodical process, a physical manifestation of reclaiming my space. Off with the old, compromised lock that she had a key to. On with the new, solid, impenetrable deadbolt that only I controlled. I worked my way around the house, replacing each lock with a fresh one. The final installation was the smart lock on the front door. I programmed it with a new code known only to me and linked it to an app on my phone. Now, I would get a notification every time the lock was accessed, and I could lock or unlock it remotely. The power was back in my hands. The physical security of my sanctuary was restored. It was just after 1 p.m. when I finished. The locksmith I'd called arrived right on time. I had him check my work, and he confirmed everything was installed correctly. He was a taciturn man who simply nodded and said, "Nobody's getting through those without a battering ram." It was a small but significant expense that felt like the best money I'd ever spent. Next, I made the call to the local sheriff's office. I explained the situation to the dispatcher calmly and clearly. "My name is Hazel," I started. "I am the owner of the property at 125 Lakeview Drive. I've discovered that a family member has been fraudulently renting it out on Airbnb without my consent. The locks have now been changed. However, I have reason to believe that the person who made the illegal booking may show up later today. I'm not expecting violence, but I wanted to make you aware of the situation in case they try to force entry or refuse to leave. I have all the documentation proving my ownership." The dispatcher was professional. She took down my information, created a record of the call, and assured me that if I needed to call 911, the responding officers would have this context. This was another crucial step: establishing a formal record of the dispute with law enforcement before any confrontation occurred. With the house secured and the authorities notified, I unpacked my groceries and tried to settle in. But I couldn't relax. I was a bundle of nerves, constantly glancing at the driveway. At 2:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the scheduled check-in, a silver minivan I didn't recognize crunched slowly up the gravel drive. A man, who I assumed was Mark from the Airbnb booking, got out, followed by a woman and 2 young kids. They looked like a perfectly normal family, excited for their lakeside vacation. My heart ached for them. They were innocent victims in my sister's scam. I stepped out onto the porch before he could even try the now useless keypad. "Hi there," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Can I help you?" The man, Mark, smiled. "Hi, we're the Millers. We have the Airbnb rental for the weekend. The host, Jesse, sent us the code, but it doesn't seem to be working." I took a deep breath. "I'm so sorry, but there has been a huge mistake," I said, my tone dripping with sympathy. "My name is Hazel, and I am the owner of this house. The person you rented from is my sister. She does not have the authority to rent this property, and she listed it fraudulently without my knowledge. Unfortunately, there is no rental agreement here for you." The smiles vanished from their faces. The woman looked confused, then angry. "What are you talking about? We paid over $1,000 for this weekend. We have a confirmation email." "I have no doubt that you do," I said gently. "And I am truly sorry for what my sister has done to you. She scammed you. I have already reported the listing to Airbnb, and I would urge you to contact them immediately to report the fraud and demand a full refund. I can even show you the deed to the house to prove I'm the owner." The kids were starting to look upset, and I felt a fresh wave of anger at Jessica for putting this family in such an awful position. Mark pulled out his phone, his face grim, and tried to call Jessica. I watched as it presumably went straight to voicemail. "She's not picking up," he said, stating the obvious. I gave them the name of a nice hotel in the next town over and offered to call to see if they had any vacancies. They were upset and disoriented, but they seemed to realize I was telling the truth. After a tense 20 minutes of them making frantic calls to Airbnb's support line, they finally packed their disappointed kids back into the minivan and drove away, but not before Mark looked at me and said, "I hope you get your sister sorted out. This is one of the worst things that's ever happened to us on a vacation." His words hung in the air long after their car had disappeared. The immediate threat was gone, but I knew the real storm was yet to come. Jessica would soon find out that her guests couldn't get in, and then she would come. I sat in one of the rocking chairs on my newly secured porch, looking out at the calm water of the lake, and waited. The first notification from my new smart lock app came at 4:30 p.m. It was a simple alert. Keypad access denied. Then another, and another. Someone was standing on my porch, repeatedly punching in the code Jessica had given them. A few minutes later, my phone started ringing. It was Jessica. I ignored the call. It rang again. I ignored it. Then came the barrage of texts. Hazel, what did you do? My guests can't get in. Why did you change the code? You're ruining my business. Pick up your phone. This is an emergency. You are being so incredibly selfish and destructive. I'm coming up there right now to fix this. I read the messages with a strange sense of detachment. The panic and anger were gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I was in the right. I had secured my property. Now I just had to weather the storm. I sent her a single, simple text message back. This property is not your business, Jessica. It is my home. You are not welcome here. Do not come. Of course, she didn't listen. 2 hours later, just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the lake, a familiar white SUV came barreling up my driveway, kicking up a cloud of gravel. Jessica was behind the wheel, and Nicholas was in the passenger seat. My parents' car pulled in right behind them. They had brought the cavalry. The family invasion had begun. I remained seated in the rocking chair on the porch, my arms crossed. I watched as Jessica stormed out of her car, her face a mask of theatrical fury. My parents got out of their car looking anxious and worried. Hazel, what is the meaning of this? Jessica shrieked as she marched towards the porch steps. You kicked out my guests. You sabotaged my booking. Do you have any idea how much money you just cost me? The money you were attempting to make by illegally renting out my house, I asked calmly. Yes, I have some idea. It's called fraud, Jessica. It is not fraud, she yelled, her voice cracking. It's our family's lake house. I was being resourceful. Mom, Dad, I said, looking past Jessica to my parents, who were hovering uncertainly by their car. You need to turn around and leave. This is between your daughter and me. You have no business being here. Now, Hazel, let's all just calm down, my father started, taking a step forward. Your sister is upset, but I'm sure we can talk this through. There is nothing to talk through, I said, my voice as solid as the new deadbolt on my door. She committed a crime. She listed my property without permission, impersonated me to my utility provider, and scammed an innocent family out of their vacation. The discussion is over. She is trespassing, and I want you all to leave. Nicholas, who had been silent until now, stepped forward with his phone up, recording. You can't just kick us out, he said with a smug look. This is a family dispute, and you're being totally unreasonable. Our audience is going to want to see how you treat your own sister. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Your audience? Nicholas, put the phone away before I add you to the trespassing complaint. You have no right to film me on my private property. This enraged Jessica further. She bounded up the steps and tried to wrench the front door open. When it didn't budge, she started pounding on it with her fists. Let me in, Hazel. Let me into my house. It's not your house, I yelled back, finally losing my temper. It has never been your house. It's mine. Grandma gave it to me for a reason, because she knew I would respect it, and she knew you wouldn't. My mother started to cry. Girls, please stop. You're tearing the family apart. She's the one who tore it apart with her lies and her greed, I said, pointing a shaking finger at Jessica. You enabled this, Mom. You and Dad. Every time she threw a tantrum, you rewarded it by pressuring me to give in. You taught her that boundaries don't apply to her. Well, they do now. This is my boundary. Get off my property. Jessica's face crumpled. The rage dissolved into performative tears. She sank onto the porch steps, sobbing loudly. I do. And understand why you hate me so much, she wailed. I was just trying to do something for myself. I have nothing, and you have everything. This house is all I had. It was a master class in manipulation, and my parents were falling for it hook, line, and sinker. My mother rushed forward to comfort her. Oh, my poor baby, she cooed. I'd had enough. I stood up. That's it. I have asked you all to leave. You have refused. You are now trespassing. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My voice was clear and steady as I spoke to the operator. "Hello, I'm calling from 125 Lakeview Drive. I spoke to your non-emergency line earlier today. The trespassers I warned you about are here now. They are my sister, Jessica, and my parents. I have repeatedly asked them to leave my property, and they are refusing." The change in my family's demeanor was instantaneous. My father's face went pale. Jessica's sobs stopped abruptly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're calling the cops? On your own family?" my mother whispered, horrified. "You left me no choice," I said, ending the call. "I told you to leave. You didn't listen. Now the police can escort you out." We stood in a tense, silent tableau for the 10 minutes it took for a patrol car to make its way down the long road to the lake. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, a beautiful backdrop to an ugly family drama. When the sheriff's car pulled up, a tall, calm-looking officer got out. He listened patiently as my family all started talking at once, Jessica accusing me of being crazy and vindictive, my mother pleading that it was all a misunderstanding. I remained silent. When they had exhausted themselves, the officer turned to me. "Ma'am, can you explain your side?" I calmly walked him through the entire situation, from the Airbnb listing to the fraudulent service calls to the texts and the confrontation. I told him I had a folder of evidence on my computer. I showed him the notification on my phone from when they had tried to enter the house. I stated clearly, "This is my property. These people are not welcome here. I have asked them to leave multiple times. I want them trespassed from my property." The officer nodded, then turned to my family. "Folks," he said in a tone that brooked no argument, "this is not a civil dispute we can mediate. This is private property. The owner has asked you to leave. If you do not leave immediately, I will have to cite you for trespassing, and her sister's car, which is blocking the driveway, will be towed at her expense. It's time to go." The finality in his voice was something they couldn't argue with. The siege was over. I had won. But as I watched them retreat to their cars, defeated and angry, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a necessary, painful amputation. The officer stayed until my parents' car and Jessica's SUV were out of the driveway and back on the main road. Before he left, he handed me his card. "If they come back, you call us immediately." "No hesitation," he said. I thanked him, my gratitude immense. His calm authority had diffused a situation that could have become much worse. As his taillights disappeared, a profound silence descended on the property, broken only by the chirping of crickets. The beautiful sunset was over, and darkness was falling. I was alone, truly alone, in my sanctuary. But the peace I usually felt here was absent, replaced by the hollow echo of the ugly confrontation. I spent the rest of the weekend in a daze, jumping at every sound. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even though I knew they were gone. The messages started again on Saturday morning. My parents sent long, pleading texts about forgiveness and the importance of family. They accused me of humiliating them and escalating the situation by calling the police. I didn't respond. The real venom, however, came from Jessica. Her texts were a wild mix of threats and insults. She promised to sue me for lost income. She threatened to post a video about me, telling her thousands of followers how I had abused her and thrown her out on the street. I forwarded the most threatening messages to Scarlett, who replied, "Let her. It's called libel, and she'd be handing you a defamation case on a silver platter. Don't reply to any of them. Go completely silent." I followed her advice. I blocked Jessica's number. I blocked my parents' numbers. I needed total silence to think. On Monday, back in the city, I received an email from Airbnb. Their investigation was complete. They had confirmed my ownership and concluded that the listing was fraudulent. They had permanently banned Jessica's host account, canceled all her upcoming bookings, and were processing full refunds to the affected guests. They also informed me they were clawing back the payouts she had already received from the May bookings. Justice, in the corporate sense, had been swift and decisive. It was a small vindication, but an important one. The real climax, however, happened the following weekend. I had returned to the lake house, determined to reclaim the peace that had been stolen from me. On Saturday afternoon, I was reading on the porch when a tow truck rumbled up my driveway. I was confused for a moment until I saw what was behind it: Jessica's white SUV. She had left it parked on the shoulder of the narrow public road right at the end of my driveway. It was a petty, passive-aggressive act of defiance, a way of saying, "I'm still here." But the narrow road had no parking signs, and one of my neighbors, likely Mr. Henderson, had finally called it in. I watched, mesmerized, as the tow truck driver expertly hooked up her vehicle. Just as he was about to pull away, Jessica's car came speeding down the road, Nicholas at the wheel. She leaped out of the passenger side before it had even fully stopped. "What are you doing? That's my car," she screamed at the driver. He gestured impassively at the no parking sign. "It's a public road, ma'am. You're illegally parked. I'm towing it." Jessica's head whipped around, and her eyes locked on me, sitting on the porch. She seemed to think I had orchestrated this. Her face contorted with a rage that was terrifying to behold. It was a full-blown, public meltdown. "You did this," she shrieked, pointing at me. "This is all your fault. You are a vindictive, evil person. I hope you're happy, alone in your stupid house." She ranted and raved, a torrent of incoherent insults and accusations. Nicholas stood by awkwardly, filming the whole thing, of course. I didn't say a word. I just sat there in my rocking chair and watched. I didn't feel anger or sadness anymore. I just felt nothing. It was like watching a stranger's tantrum. The person screaming on the side of the road wasn't my sister. I didn't know who she was. The tow truck driver ignored her, finished his work, and slowly pulled away with her SUV in tow. The sight of her precious status symbol being hauled away seemed to finally break her. She let out a guttural sob and collapsed onto the road, pounding her fists on the asphalt. Nicholas finally stopped filming and tried to help her up. I stood, turned around, and went back inside my house, closing the door on the pathetic scene. That was the last time I saw her. The fallout was immense. My parents didn't speak to me for months, sending occasional messages through other relatives about how I needed to be the bigger person and apologize for hurting the family. I refused. An apology implies wrongdoing, and I had done nothing wrong except stand up for myself. The extended family took sides, and holiday gatherings became a minefield. But in the quiet solitude of my lake house, I found my peace again. It was a different kind of peace now, not the gentle, inherited peace of my grandmother, but a stronger, more resilient peace I had fought for and won myself. I had learned a hard lesson, that some family ties are not bonds of love, but chains of obligation, and sometimes the only way to be free is to break them. I lost a sister that summer, and in some ways my entire family, but I saved myself. And as I sit here on my porch, watching the sun set over the water, I know, without a doubt, that I made the right choice. My sanctuary is secure.